Everybody's got a price, it's the $1 million man. Podcast in demand. Understand, everybody's got a price, $1 million man. Everybody's got a price, $1 million man. Everybody's got a pod, it's the $1 million man. Podcast in demand. Understand, everybody's got a price, $1 million man. Everybody's got a price.
What's up, everybody? It's Marcus D'Angelo, and we are back for another episode of Everybody's Got a Pod. But this week, we are flying solo. Our man, the $1 million man, had a jam-packed week, so we are going to go ahead and call an audible this time around with a throwback to a couple early episodes of Ask Ted Anything. A lot of you, I know, have not heard these yet because maybe you picked up our podcast kind of in the middle of the run. So this is a fun throwback to 2023 and some of the early stuff that I did with Ted. I hope that you guys enjoy it, and I hope you'll join us next week as we're going to be talking about Mid-South Wrestling in January 1985. Really fun time in Ted's career. Starts having some run-ins with our old pal Jim Duggan, and there's a lot to discuss there. So we'll look forward to seeing you next week right here on Everybody's Got a Pod. All right, let's get into these questions. Going Broadway podcast asks, what is your favorite match from Mid-South that you were part of? And what about your favorite match from Japan that you were part of?
Wow, Mid-South. I spent so much time in Mid-South, but I think probably the match I got a kick out of is the way that Bill Watts turned me heel. Oh my gosh, you talk about heat. Oh wow. Watts was just so good. I mean, we could have done it, any other way, but it's kind of like that whole scenario where you see him being, taking care of his friend and not wanting to win a match like that. To me, becoming the asshole.
Man, we watched it last week here on Everybody's Got a Pod. If you missed that episode about JYD, it was our 11th episode. Go back into the archives and check it out. We did a watch along with that moment, and it is just a blast. So please go out of your way to see that. What about in Japan, Ted? What is your favorite match from your time in Japan?
Gosh, now I eventually became Stan Hansen's tag team partner, and just for the fans who don't know, Japan they had their own wrestling entity it's not part of WWE, never has been, and they had two organizations, All Japan Pro Wrestling, which was the original wrestling. I think, and this is like way back when I was 12. I think my dad went to Japan one time on a 6-week tour, and that was when pro wrestling was starting in Japan. Anyway, so I go over there for All Japan Pro Wrestling, and then eventually another company with the guy's name was Inoki. He broke away from All Japan and created New Japan Pro Wrestling. But I always stuck with All Japan. Loyalty's a big thing over there. And one of their top guys, and I met him while I was still in college playing football, because again, the Funks were the Funk family, basically were the guys booking talent for Japan to bring over. And so they had a really close relationship. So one of the guys that they sent to Amarillo, the Amarillo territory, was this guy who had actually, his name was Teruta, Jumbo Teruta.
Okay.
He had an amateur background. He wrestled for Japan in the Olympics. And he was a legit, real wrestler, but ended up turning into a great worker. But I met him over here when he was wrestling for the Funks. And then when I went to Japan, it was a memorable match for me because we had become friends. And, I didn't know, I was going to go to Japan on a tour, whatever it was. I think this was a 5-week tour. And but what he did for me in a match, he didn't have to do. I mean, he really made me over there. And so here's one of their biggest stars, and he has a match with me that he basically he got me over in one match. I mean, he made the wrestling fans in Japan respect my ability, and it was something he didn't really have to do, and it's just something I'll never forget. But then, I guess another memorable match for me would be tagging with Stan Hansen and us winning the Japan version of the World Tag Team title.
Mm-hmm.
And those are two on the top of my list.
Man, can't wait to talk about your days in Japan. That's coming up here very, very soon on the podcast. So everybody stay tuned. I know a lot of fans online have been clamoring for your All Japan days, and I promise we will get there. Mark Rebman asks, when did you first get wind of Leroy McGurk's plot to take you out that Jim Ross talked about in his book? So Ted, I don't know that all of our listeners know the backstory on this. Can you tell the full story?
Okay. So I go and I start wrestling in the summer of '75 for Bill Watts in that territory. Now, Bill Watts and Leroy McGurk had become partners, and I don't know all the background of that, but I know obviously, and Bill Watts played football at the University of Oklahoma, and so he was an athlete, and he had got in the business, and he's a brilliant guy. And so he's now like partners with Leroy McGurk. And at the time, I guess when he first went to work for Leroy McGurk's territory. I mean, I can remember back when I was with my mom and dad, and I was like in the first. I don't even know if I was in the first grade yet. But I remember that we stayed in Tulsa, Oklahoma for a summer. And all I can remember is this house that we rented had this big yard with a huge hedge over. Anyway, it's funny the things you remember. But anyway, I remember that was for Leroy McGurk. That's the first time I ever heard Leroy McGurk, and of course by this time, he was already, blind, couldn't see. And so, like fast forward, I grow up, and then I go back to, my first shot at wrestling, because Dick Murdoch talked to Watts and got me booked. And I spent the previous summer as a referee in the Amarillo territory, and you learn a lot just by being the third man in the ring. You really do. And of course, because I grew up in the business and everything, nobody thought that I needed to, I could bump, I could do the stuff, and so they just started me. And so, I mean, it was kind of like, okay, kid, let's see what you got. And so I started there in Mid-South, and so Leroy McGurk has a daughter. And I think, everybody, I mean, if you guys remember who Mike McGurk is, well, back when I met her, I mean, I'm trying to think of there was a like a famous, she was, I don't know if she was in any movies or what, but I mean, she's beautiful. And, and I saw Mike. And I mean, that's who she reminded me of.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, now, and so, like you start talking to somebody and one thing led to another, and pretty soon Mike and I are dating. And so when, and it was funny too, because I remember one night we had a show in, I think Little Rock, Arkansas, and I was riding back to Tulsa with Bill Watts and a couple other guys, and I had told Mike, I said, tell me a place that's along the way where I can have them drop me off and meet you there, because this was supposed to be a big secret, of us of seeing each other. And so she gave me a place and said okay. And so uh, and so when we get to the place, uh, Bill says, "Oh well, is your ride here yet?" And I said, "Not yet, but they'll be here." I said, "Oh, we'll wait. We don't want you to get lost. Left, out in the middle of nowhere, and your ride doesn't show up. So they'll show up. I'm sure of it. No, that's okay. We'll wait."
Oh no.
And I kept trying to, and they just finally started laughing. They said, "Look, you think it's a big secret, but everybody in this car knows that you're seeing Mike." Oh gosh, it's like the only, and so uh, when Leroy heard about it, he went ballistic. He was like, you got to, Jim Ross can tell the story much better than I can because he lived it. Now Jim's working for the company at the time, and Jim at that time was just like a referee, but he also helped, Leroy, get around and stuff like that. So he said he gets this call from Leroy, and he says I'm gonna kill that no good SOB. And so Jim tells a story about having to get in the car with Leroy McGurk, and he's got like a 38 revolver, and he's a blind guy, right? He's got a 38 revolver in his lap.
Oh God.
Yeah, and he's like, and he's smoking a cigar, and I said the cigar, like one of the thing, like it fell off and hit him on the leg and kind of burned him, and which threw the gun on the floor or something. He says I'm just now praying, so God, let me make it through this ordeal. And so when they show up, I can't remember where we were at the time, but he was never going to find me anyway. Because all the boys and Murdoch, he got the big kick out of this. So everything quiets down, and but we're wrestling in Tulsa, and whenever we wrestled in Tulsa, Leroy would have somebody bring him in the dressing room so he could greet all the guys and everything, and and so they bring him in the dressing room, and and everybody knows, but Dick Murdoch, he looks at me, and it's kind of like he's about to say, "Hey, Tommy." I'm looking at him, like with my hands, like I'm praying, like, "Don't do it, Murdoch. Don't you dare do it." And he just kept teasing that, and finally Leroy left. But man, yeah. So it was it was a hot deal for a while, and then just that's just life, and the other part of this story is that my first marriage was in the crapper, and if that hadn't been the case, then I wouldn't be seeing anybody. But at the time, I guess illegally at the time, I was still married, but we weren't living together or seeing each other, and we were in the midst of a divorce. So anyway, that's the.
What became of your relationship with Mike?
Well, it's kind of like I left the territory, and that was it. It was just kind of one of those deals. It was like, and actually, one of the things that I did that that never would have. I'm a huge fan of Elvis Presley. I think Elvis Presley, hands down, is probably the single greatest and most renowned and well-known entertainer ever.
Yep.
Pick a genre. And she was Mike and her whole family. Actually, she told me that, her and her mother got to see Elvis in Vegas because the NWA, annually has a meeting for the organization and all of the people in it, and the heads, all the promoters that were, part of the NWA would meet in Las Vegas, like once a year. And while they were out there, he happened to be in Vegas. And so, she got to see him out there.
Wow.
Well, so then, while we're dating, she says Elvis Presley is coming to Tulsa. And it just worked out, and he was going to, I think it was going to be on a like a Saturday or a Sunday. I can't remember what it was, but I was going to be there. I was going to be in Tulsa. I mean, to wrestle, but maybe not on that day. I can't remember. Anyway, Mike gets us tickets.
Nice.
To go. And so I got to see Elvis Presley live there. And what was funny was that apparently while they were out and I didn't know this, but Elvis was a huge wrestling fan.
Really?
Yes. Matter of fact, they said that in the old Memphis Coliseum, and I've only wrestled there a couple of times, it's like, if you look up, there's a catwalk way up at the top, and that catwalk goes out all the way to like right in the middle of the building.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like crosses there, and you could sit up there and be looking down and have the best seat in the house for a wrestling match. And they said that they had done that. They snuck Elvis into the building and put him way up on that catwalk. And if you look up, I mean, it's far enough up that you couldn't tell who, unless you had binoculars,
Right.
Hey, who's that up there? But Elvis actually watched the show from that viewpoint in Memphis, Tennessee. Here's where I'm going.
Mm-hmm.
So we go and see Elvis, and we had pretty good seats. And in this show, it's like if you ever watched there's a documentary on him about when they started going on tour, and they were like 15 days, 15 cities and things like that. And the way the way the show opened and everything, and I experienced all that. So apparently, Mike McGurk noticed one of the what do you call them? The guys that set up and tear down and all that stuff that traveled with them.
Oh, like roadies.
A roadie. And so she recognized one of the guys, and waved at him, and he responded, and so she just ran up there and talked to him for a minute, and so she comes back and he says, okay, they're staying at the whatever hotel, and obviously they've got the whole top floor, and we have the password to get in.
Whoa.
So I'm going, holy shit, I'm gonna get to meet Elvis Presley. So the concert was the greatest of all time and everything. And I don't know what it is. I don't know what caused this flare up between Mike and I, but we got in the biggest damn fight about something. I can't even remember what it was, but because of that fight, we didn't go.
Oh,
yeah,
man.
Yeah, no kidding.
Brutal. So you could have met Elvis if you hadn't gotten into a fight.
Yeah.
I'd have buried that hatchet quick. Dude, incredible. So that story is something I've heard about here and there. I've never really heard the full story, but man, that's above and beyond expectations. That was great. Next up, we've got Aldo, who asks, you were there for a lot of the drama between Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels. Did you see any of it backstage? And what did you think about it when you heard about the Montreal Screwjob?
I was never eyewitness to any confrontation between the two, and the Montreal Screwjob. I remember it. I just don't remember all the details.
So, in a nutshell, Bret Hart had been asked to drop the belt to Shawn Michaels, but he didn't want to drop the belt to Shawn because of the backstage issues the two of them have been having. He was like, I'll drop it to anybody else. And also, of course, it's in Montreal, so it's Canada. So Bret didn't want to drop the belt in Canada. So he was like, I will drop it to anybody else, or we can do it, the following night on Raw. He was like, but I'm not dropping the belt to him here in Canada. And so Shawn Michaels winds up getting him in a sharpshooter, and Vince has the timekeeper ring the bell, and that's it. So they kind of screwed Bret out of the belt, and that was Bret's last match in the WWE. And so yeah, it's a lot of people are like kind of on either side where they're like, well, Shawn was just a menace backstage and he created that problem. And then guys like Jake Roberts say like, hey, Bret Hart should have just done business, and it's not right that he did that. So what's your take on it?
I agree 100% with Jake. It's business is business. I mean, irregardless of your personal feelings about somebody, when it comes to business, it's like, people go to work every day, right? And I'm sure that there are people that go to work every day and they have to work with people that they don't necessarily like or they don't think much of. But business is business. And while you're doing business, take care of business and then go your separate way. And if you don't want to be around the guy, you don't have to be around the guy. And so, Jake was just right. I take Jake hit it right on the head. When you're asked to do something in the business, it's business. So, do it. I mean, it's kind of like, just because was it because he was in Canada, he would rather not drop the belt in Canada or something because he's Canadian. I don't know, but again, we all have to do things. Just what was it? Trying to think who said it. He said it might have been Vince. It was like, there are times when all of us have to sometimes eat a shit sandwich. You just don't have a choice.
Yeah, Jake actually he said on our podcast, he was like, do you think that I liked everybody that I worked with? He was like, absolutely not. He was like, but if it's a job, it's just like any other job. So it's like,
exactly.
I think a lot of people get into their head about like, oh, well, I'm a performer and this doesn't match with my character or whatever thing. It's at the end of the day, it's like, hey, you've got a job, you have a boss that asks you to do something, just do it.
Yeah, exactly.
JP Crawford up next. What was your most embarrassing moment during a match and why?
Wow.
You ever like wipe out or like, I hear a lot, and Jake and I just talked about this one not long ago, that it's kind of a common thing in pro wrestling for guys to shit themselves because you're getting slammed. Maybe you're not feeling well. So it's, I don't know, anything like that ever happen to you?
Yeah. Okay. I can't remember where we were, and it doesn't matter where we were, but and that's the other thing is like, the show must go on. And whether you're sick, unless you're on your deathbed, if you can get to the ring, you got to go.
Right.
And I was sick. I mean, sick enough that I was throwing up in the toilet in the locker room. And but when it came time to go to the ring, I went to the ring, and there were a couple times where I actually, had him throw me out. And I actually, at one time, I rolled under the ring where nobody could see me, and I threw up under the ring.
My God.
Yeah, I threw up under the ring, and then I rolled back out and got going again. And yeah, I did squirt my pants that night, but it wasn't. It was kind of like, it's one of those things. If that's ever going to happen to you, you don't want it to be the rush. They're like oh my God, it's like, it's like if it's just a little bit, that it was actually hideable, and and it's hard to hide anything like that when what you're wearing isn't much anyway.
Right.
So
When you're just down to trunks, my
yeah,
God.
oh gosh, yeah, it was like, yeah, I was so glad to get back to the dressing room, and uh,
Mick Foley talked about it once before too, and he said, and this is an exact quote from Mick. He said, "If you don't poop your pants in the ring every once in a while, you're not trying hard enough."
yeah. Yeah.
Next up, we've got Logan Smith, who asks, while traveling in the luxurious style as a $1 Million Man, was there any one trip that stood out more than the others because of the mode of travel, and everything being taken care of by the company? Any one trip really stick out for you, Ted?
Not really. The I have to tell you that the trips that I remembered more than when I was wrestling is when I went back to work. When I went back to work for the company as I was working in the office. I don't know what you would classify
As
me,
like
but
an agent?
yeah, more or less. But it wasn't just the agents only showed up at the shows.
Mm.
This was me. Me working with a group of writers.
Okay, so when you were part of the creative team.
Part of when I was part of the creative team. So we would go to TV, right? We'd go to TV, and back then we did TV once every 3 weeks. We do 3 shows in one night in one venue, and then something that was drivable, the next day, to the second venue, and then after the second venue, 3 more shows. Then the guys who were wrestling would just continue their tour. Well, I was as part of the creative team. I got on the private jet and flew back to Stamford with Vince.
All right.
That's pretty cool.
C. Smith is up next. Do you wish you could have spent some time as a babyface in WWE? What heels would you have liked to work with?
It's funny, but once I became the heel, I just loved it. I loved it, because it was so different. And it's like it's almost like being a total different person. It's like you turn it on and you turn it off.
Mm-hmm.
And not to mention the fact that, as a heel, and that was still, I don't know what I'm not there anymore, so I don't know how they look at things, but traditionally, the heel is the guy in the match who's calling it. He's step by step, if you will. And there are some guys, obviously, who have enough respect for each other that they do it together. And
Mm-hmm.
I've had matches like that. Like Jake and I, when we worked together, we both called it, and I never envisioned being a babyface. It was just, that was a spot that, because I don't know, you got like you've got one guy usually that is like in the early 90s. Hulk Hogan was the guy.
Yes.
He was the guy, and then Vince just kept feeding him heels, and I was one of those heels, but I was a heel that, it's like you can't always be right at the top. Now, again, Hogan had his run there, whoever that guy is. And again, a lot of times, it's kind of like baby faces are, they say they can come and go, but a good heel, he could stay for a long time.
Yeah, and Hogan is at the top of this mountain as a babyface. So
Yeah.
it's like, okay, so you're not going to be the top babyface if you're a babyface. So your options are you can either be a lower on the card as a babyface, or you can work in the main event as a heel.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, it's pretty hard to beat that gig.
And and the way Vince moved us around, I was, and of course, and my run my run as a heel was pretty long. I mean, I think it was probably longer than most. I mean, I remember Bruce Pritchard and I talking about it, and when they said, we're gonna move you to maybe a tag team. I said, golly, a tag team. He says, well, man, he says, you've been riding the rail at the top here for a long time. He says, you just need to do, I think they want to do something different. And that's when they tagged me up with Mike Rotunda.
And it was legitimately 10 straight years that you were a heel, because you came into the WWF as a heel in 87, and then you didn't turn babyface until 97 when you got paired up with the Steiners. So that's a hell of a heel run.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, I mean, he did also ask something interesting here. As a heel, you have to work against baby faces back in those days. So you missed opportunities to work with a lot of guys who were heels. Like a guy that sticks out for me is, Ric Flair came there in 91, 92. You didn't get to work with him in the WWF on a huge stage because you were also a heel.
Yeah.
So is there anybody else out there?
But I did work with Rick. I mean, when Rick was the champion, and of course the champion, the NWA world champion, the only place he was ever a baby face would be Charlotte, where that was his home.
Mm-hmm.
That was his home territory. And I'm not even sure that would, that he would have been a baby face there. But I know for the most part, like the Funks were baby faces because they lived there. That was their territory. They owned it.
Right.
So that's where they were baby faces. Everywhere else they wrestled when they were champion, they were a heel, because it's like the territories would they would build a guy up, like you see the guy make the climb, the good guy that you root for, and he's knocking them off, and he finally beats the top heel in the territory and whatever. And so, and of course that story could go on a longer, or if not, but then when whoever the NWA world champion came in, he came in to face the top baby face, because that's going to be the biggest draw.
Yes.
It only makes sense. It's like, okay, the world champion's coming in to wrestle Magdog Fashan, who is always a heel.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't make any sense. But if that baby face, I mean that heel, even if he's not a heel, the world champion, you put him in the ring with any baby face in the territory, he's automatically going to be a heel, because the hometown crowd is going to cheer for their guy.
Right.
So, that's what you tried to make happen all the time.
Interesting dynamic, and interesting all the possible combinations that were out there. That you did get to work with Rick, but it's thinking about you as the $1 Million Man working with Ric Flair. I don't know. That just seems fascinating to me.
I don't think we didn't work in the WWF.
No.
I don't think at all. But prior to that, and I think I know in Amarillo, I think we did, and I think in Georgia, but we had a few matches. But I mean, Rick was so easy. Oh my gosh, yeah, it was like doing a dance.
Dr. Legend has got kind of a related question. Who's the one opponent you dreamed to work a program with that never came into fruition? Anybody stick out?
I can't really, think of anybody off the top of my head that, I mean, again, Ric Flair, if I had, again, we wrestled a time or two, but I never had a program with Rick.
Mm-hmm.
Bret Hart and I, we wrestled one time.
Mm-hmm.
And we tore the house down. And there's a guy that I only got to wrestle one time, and I would love to have been able to have a program with Bret. Again, because we came from the same psychology of the business. you
Yes.
know, what it is, you know, and we were both, you know, like workers. It was like, you know, it was kind of like, you know, watching a movie. You know, we could both tell a story, and so Brett was one of those guys. Yeah,
Another name I'll throw out there for a program would be you and Shawn Michaels would be something else.
yeah, you know, and you know, I worked with Sean when he was, you know, probably when he first started, when he was in the dress. The first time I saw him was in the dressing room at Mid South when he came in to work for Bill Watts. But
Did you see the potential in him to rise to the main event?
I did, yeah, I did. You know, I mean, I never saw him. I didn't get the opportunity to see him interview much at the time because he was brand new and he wasn't in a spot where he would be interviewed yet.
Right, just an enhancement talent whenever you worked with
Yeah,
him.
yeah. But yeah, he had it.
All right, we'll do a couple more and then we'll get out of here, Ted. Instagram, a wrestling historian asks, can you tell us about your time on Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous? Thanks in advance.
Lifestyles of the rich and famous. It's just crazy. I mean, you know, a lot of people have seen this show, and but when they came to me and they said, "We're going to put you on Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous," and this is Vince trying to make the public believe I'm really that guy.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I did a segment of Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous, and you see me traveling in my limousine, and you see me, you know, you see me pull up to this lavish home, and you know, and kind of take you on a tour of the house. It was Vince's house. It was the boss's house. That's where we did Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous. And of course, nobody knew that at the time, you know. But yeah, and I don't even know if Vince still lives in that location, but probably not, because he's, you know, not a married guy anymore. So
He's got the money to move just about wherever he wants to.
oh yeah,
You know, Vince's house has become almost like lore among wrestling fans because, you know, we always would hear over the years that like talents that Vince had a lot of respect for, really saw potential in. And
yeah,
whenever they would sign the contract, he'd bring them to his house to
yeah,
negotiate and sign the contract. They
yeah.
also did like a lot of creative meetings and stuff there. Whenever you were negotiating the contract with Vince, were you brought to the house?
Well, I did go to his house a couple of times, but it wasn't necessarily at that time. It's kind of like because when we first met, you know, the other guy in that meeting was Pat Patterson,
Mm-hmm.
because Pat was Vince's right hand man at the time.
And knew you from your previous run.
Oh yeah, and I'm sure that it's Pat that probably put me over to Vince a lot because he had seen, you know, I guess my potential. When he first presented it to me, it was in the office with the idea, the concept, and everything. And I didn't want to be too quick, you know, jump in the, you know, and I wanted to go run it all by Terry Funk, who was my kind of like my mentor. I ran everything by him, and so I left that first meeting and said, "Well, you know, you know, I just got to think about this, and I'll get back to you." And so he said, "Good." And so then when I talked to Terry, Terry said, "If he's got something that he thinks is made for you and your, you know, what you have to offer," he says, "Go, man." He says, "Don't look back." He says, "That's the place to be now. That's where wrestling's going." And so I called Vince back and I said, "Okay, I'm your guy. Now tell me what it is." He wouldn't tell me on the phone. He said, "Nope." He said, "I'm flying you back up here." so he flies me and my wife back up to New York. And while I'm in signing the contract with him, Melanie's out, you know, being entertained by the secretaries, and So then he said, here's the deal. He says, we look forward to working with you. He says, the limousine is waiting for you and your wife. We have reserved a room for you at the Helmsley Palace in Manhattan.
All right.
Which is, yeah, it's like, like plush. and in other words, it's like, it's like I think we had a dinner reservation at a place. I can't remember the name of it, but my gosh, it was some of the best food I've ever eaten in my life. And then we had dinner, and then basically he says, and there's several shows in town. There's always like a theatrical presentation, stage show. And he says, pick one you like, and it's yours. He says, and of course, and that's when the girl comes out and counts out the $100 bills. And he said, welcome to the team, and go start being the $1 million man.
Is your wife like, okay, we made the right move?
When I got back in the car with her, I said, you're not going to believe this. And I said, our ship has finally sailed. and the rest is history. So
next thing you know, she's seeing you as an action figure in Walmart.
yeah.
Couple more and we're done, Ted. Have you covered his... Oh, I'm sorry. This one's from Dan Ochoa. Have you covered his theme music yet? I'd like to know the background on how his theme came to be. Ted, did they just give it to you, or did you have to select it, or how did it work?
The guy who wrote most of the theme music for our era was
Jim Johnston.
No. Well, maybe Jimmy Hart. Jimmy Hart used to be in a band. They were a one-hit wonder. I can't remember the name of that song.
The Gentrys.
Yeah, he was the Gentrys.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it was Jimmy. Jimmy did my song.
Man, it was absolutely perfect. Couldn't have possibly fit your character better. All right, last one, and then we're getting out of here, Ted. Sean Conover asks, what was your favorite match of all time? It's a simple one, but I'm interested to hear the answer.
To wrestle with a lot of the talent that I have wrestled, it's hard for me to zero in on one match. I mean, you got to understand, I wrestled, there's 31 days in a month, and 21 of those days, at least, I was wrestling every night.
Man.
But there are key figures. Number one, when I first began, the guys who helped me a lot, Dick Murdoch, Killer Carl Cox. These are guys that I had, great respect for, and they were greatly talented. Cowboy Bill Watts. I never wrestled Cowboy, but the influence and his understanding of the psychology of wrestling, I go, gosh, I'm so glad I started there with Bill, and I kept going back to him because I respected him so much. But Jake, Jake and I, we had a little, it wasn't long enough to me. I would have I could have worked with Jake every night, because, same deal. We came from the same background.
Jake and I recently talked about Mid-South, July 1985 on our podcast, and that included a match between the two of you at WrestleFest 1985, an outdoor show at Skelly Field in Tulsa.
Yeah.
And so that card included Dusty Rhodes versus Ric Flair. That card had Dutch Mantel working on it, like a lot of really big names on that card. And unanimously in all of the reviews, it was you and Jake stole the show at that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean,
and
incredible chemistry.
and well, yeah, and all of that comes from the fact that we understood each other because we came from the same type of background. We
Hmm.
came from a background of the match is the show. And so, it's kind of like I would watch matches that went on before me. And, I tried intentionally not to do anything that the people had already seen if I couldn't help it. It's just, I don't know. It's just a different, you know.
Bygone era.
Yeah.
All right, guys, it's 2025, and it's time for you to get your mojo back in the bedroom with a little help from Blue Chew. It is time for you to have better sex, and Blue Chew is the way to go. Blue Chew is putting its money where its mouth is and offering you a month for free. And guys, the process is real simple. Just sign up at BlueChew.com, consult with one of their licensed medical providers, and once you're approved, you'll receive your prescription within days. Blue Chew tablets are made right here in the US of A and prepared and shipped direct to your door. Boy, let me tell you, you will see that mail carrier coming and come sprinting down your driveway. You can take them anytime, day or night, so you can plan ahead or be ready when the opportunity arises. The best part? It's all done online. That means no visits to the doctor's office, no awkward conversations, and no waiting in line at the pharmacy anymore. Look, the question's always the same whenever I tell people about Blue Chew. They ask, does it work? Let me tell you, brother, it works. You're going to be called an Eagle Scout the way you're going to be pitching tents after you try out Blue Chew. And Blue Chew is on a mission. They will not stop until every man is bricked up like a brick house. That is what they're after. That's what they've been telling me. It's time for you to find out for yourself with a month for free. Guys, think about this. You could be missing out on the very best sex of your entire life without even knowing about it. Blue Chew is worth the try to at least set your mind at ease on that. They say that there's nothing sexier than confidence, and Blue Chew can help deliver it where it counts. We can all relate to wanting to feel more confident, especially in the bedroom, and Blue Chew's here for you. It's time, guys. Make your life easier by getting harder and discover your options at BlueChew.com. And we've got a special deal for our listeners. Try your first month of Blue Chew free. Visit BlueChew.com for more details and important safety information. And we thank Blue Chew for sponsoring the podcast. So the first question we've got this week is Matt Pleasance, who asks, do you have any good Tatanka stories? I was 10 when he turned heel, and it broke my heart.
I can't recall anything specific. I mean, I was there when Tatanka broke in, and saw him, come into his own, and I think that's why, I don't think anybody knows, but I was like, when they told me this what that we're going to do, I was very favorable of him because of how far he had come, basically. So, but I mean, any specific story concerning Tatanka, I couldn't really tell you. All I can tell you is a real good guy. I know he's got a son, I think, that's playing ball. I think wrestling too, and that's doing very well.
Yes,
which is that's really cool too. And so it's another wrestler's kid who's admiring his father.
Yeah. And I'll tell you what, I know that his son, at least what I've seen on social media, looks like he's achieving good things in amateur wrestling, and that seems like a good foot in the door for professional wrestling if that's what he chooses to do down the road.
Yeah.
Tim Rawls is up next. Who was your favorite tag team partner? Was there anyone that you would have liked to have worked with that you never got to?
Well, I mean, of course, Mike Rotunda, IRS, and I became tag team partners, and we worked very, very, very well together. But I guess when I want to pick I mean, he would be on the list. But if you go back into my beginning, back when I was a rookie, so to speak, and still learning my trade, I got tagged up with a guy named Dick Murdoch, who, I'll be honest with you, Dick Murdoch doesn't get the credit that he should get, because Dick was just unpredictable. I mean, you never knew what he was going to do or what he was going to say, and I mean, it's funny. You could be in the ring with him because, and I experienced this as a referee. I was in the ring with him when he and a guy named Killer Carl Cox had a big feud, and they're in the ring, and he's cutting jokes. Murdoch is, with me and with his opponent, and but outside, as far as the crowd is concerned, he's beating the hell out of Killer Carl Cox. So he was just a funny guy. But I mean, in terms of a partner, well, so I partner, and again, that's that rub again. They put you with an established guy, and of course, everybody knew the history. Everybody knew that Dick Murdoch was another guy that came out of West Texas, and he tells everybody he went to West Texas State, but he never did. But he was born and raised there. His father was a wrestler, and so, and again, my entry into Mid-South Wrestling was through Dick Murdoch. So anyway,
a lot of history.
He was one of those guys that, just, he made it easy for me. So,
when I read that question, I was like, okay, it's going to be between two for Ted. In my head, I was like, probably either Steve Williams or Stan Hansen. But so would you say that you had better chemistry with Mike Rotunda?
Well, no, it's funny. Mike and I had good chemistry, but the gimmick, the IRS gimmick, the tax man gimmick, it was like, I don't know that there would anything that would be wild about it, and he did it very well.
Yes.
But again, going back to tag teams. When Steve Williams and I tagged up, we had a heck of a run. And again, that was Bill putting Steve with me because, Steve had basically just come out of the University of Oklahoma he played football and wrestled for OU.
He was a bad dude.
And yeah, I mean, that doesn't happen anymore. I mean, when my dad was in college, my dad played football and wrestled, and was a 3-time conference champion in wrestling. And in 1946, basically when he was in the Navy, he won the AAU National Heavyweight Wrestling title. My dad did.
Wow.
And again, Steve, Dr. Death, I mean, great guy. I mean, there's another guy who I don't think really realized how tough he was. I mean, because it's kind of like if you get in a bar fight and you can only have one guy as your partner, he and Haku, because Steve was really, he was really a great guy. There's a guy, whose life was too short.
Unfortunately, yes.
Yeah.
But gosh, what a legacy he left behind, not only in America, but overseas, football, wrestling, as you mentioned, just a freak athlete. And actually, this transitions well into another question we've got here. PJ Garrett asks, who's the toughest man in the history of wrestling? Is it Dr. Death?
The toughest guy. That would be hard to say. I mean, I don't know that you could pick any one man and say he was the absolutely, legitimately toughest guy ever. But Haku would have to be in one of those guys because he is legitimately just tough as nails. And again, thank God he's such a nice guy. You'd hate to, for a guy his size and whatever to be like a real dickhead.
Jake has told me that he witnessed some of the stuff that Haku did, including like pulling another man's eye out, biting a guy's nose off. Were you ever present for any of that?
I wasn't present for it, but I have seen him in action. I mean, I've heard all the stories. I never got to witness it. Don't know that I really wanted to witness anybody getting their nose bit off, but
No, it sounds terrifying.
yeah. But he was a legitimate tough guy. Dick Murdoch in his era was a legitimate tough guy, and again, where wrestling goes, I don't know. But for legitimacy, I mean, like my dad was regarded as a great professional wrestler,
Mm-hmm.
but he also, like I've said, was the AAU national heavyweight champion in 1946, and then, like I said, lettered 4 years. I mean, 3 years in a row was conference champion when he was at Nebraska. Yeah.
Man, I would love to do a full episode at some point about your dad or family history or something like that, where we can do it kind of a deep dive on the entire history of everything and talk about his career a little bit. So let's definitely do that down the road, because
Okay.
I'm learning about your dad. He was obviously way before my time, but as I learned about him, he's a fascinating guy. Plus, he's Paisan. I'm Italian too.
Yeah. Hey, yeah. Yeah. Like they go, Ted, what's your name? Ted DiBiase. I said, now, if you were Italian, they basically all the old Italians would say he's a Biaz. They never, so is it DiBiase or is it DiBiase? I mean, it's spelled like DiBiase, but it's not pronounced that way.
It's DiBiase.
DiBiase.
It's funny. I was on YouTube and tons and tons of positive comments, and then I saw one that said, "This is the most Italian podcast ever." I sent it to my brother. It just cracked me up.
That is awesome. Well, and again, obviously, because I mean, in reality, I am not, I'm not biologically Italian, but I'm the first one that'll punch you in the nose if you call me a wop.
Yep.
Yeah, it's kind of like, I mean, that's the culture I grew up in, and my dad adopted me, and I adopted the culture.
Yeah,
I mean,
and it's
kind of like
disrespectful to your father.
It's like you make spaghetti, you make pizza. Okay, anything Italian, anything Italian, most anything Italian, it's all about the sauce.
Oh, no question about
If the
it.
sauce isn't right, nothing's right. And I can still remember my mom would get this great big, I don't know how many gallons of water or whatever you could put in that thing, but the base of her spaghetti sauce was a pork roast. And I think different people use different things, but hers was a pork roast. And I think she started off with like 5 cans of tomatoes and 4 things of tomato paste. And I don't know, but I know that was on the oven all day, on the stove all day long, simmering and making it and everything. And then, so by the time you went to get that meat, I mean, it just rolled off the bone.
I'll tell you what, man.
Brother,
Sunday dinner.
That's old school. Oh God,
it had to be something special.
And the garden, they grew their own garden. Oh my gosh, their own tomatoes and all that stuff. And oh my gosh, it was just it was heaven, man.
I think the wife and I are going to be having Italian tonight. I just made that executive decision.
Well, Melanie and I found a place here called Enzo's, and it's pretty good.
The name sounds promising. That's very Italian.
Oh wow!
All right, let's get to some more listener questions. We've got Jason Petiti, another Italian, up next. What was your relationship with Mr. Perfect? Do you wish you had worked a program with him at some point?
I Kurt and I got to be good friends. We actually, I think what's funny is we met on a trip to Japan. We were both booked by, of course, I was there with Stan Hansen a lot, but they would book a tour. There would be like 5 or 6 gaijins. Gaijin is the Japanese word for foreigner.
Mm-hmm.
There'd be 5 or 6 gaijins, on the trip, and and he was one of them. Great guy. You know, I mean, I mean, and kind of, you know what? What's crazy about, you know, that Mr. Perfect? I mean, he was legitimately talented. I mean, you know, like a lot of that stuff he could really do.
Mhm.
Yeah. But good guy.
They said that like during the vignettes that they would be shooting, like he'd have to hit like a basket or something. And he'd just hit it on the first try. They'd say
Oh,
like,
yeah.
"Hey, hit a home run, no problem." He just nails a home run the first try, just like a great athlete.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
He was good guy too. But yeah, you know, another guy who wasn't here long enough.
no, definitely gone too soon. I know that also though that he was a legendary ribber. Do you happen to remember any specific ribs from
I
Mr.
don't
Perfect?
remember any specific ribs, but that is a fact. Oh, he loved to rib you. And the deal was, I tried to stay neutral, you know, because, you know, you definitely don't want to rib him first because whatever he comes back with as a counter rib is going to be worse. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
Did
Crazy.
you ever rib anyone?
Not really. Yeah.
Like if anything, just small stuff.
Oh, you know, nothing I can remember. Yeah.
Well, Martin Zwolfer is up next. Is there a superstar of your active time that you ever wanted to work with but never had the chance to, and why?
Superstar of my active time.
There's one guy that came to mind for me whenever I read this, and I'm not sure if you've worked with him or not, but I was like, has Ted ever worked with Barry Windham? I feel like you guys would have chemistry.
Um, no, Barry and I, you know, we never did, you know, we never worked us crazy. I mean, you know, because he and Mike became tag team partners together, but no, it was just never, we were never in the same territory uh, together.
Man, that could have been a great,
Yeah.
rivalry.
But well, you know, I'll tell you a guy that I did get to work with, and I loved working with, but uh, didn't get to work with him nearly enough, and that was Paul Orndorff.
Oh, that's a great one.
You know, Paul was really good, and I'm trying to think where it was. It was Mid South, and I had turned heel, and he was still a baby face. Bill came to both of us, you know, and it was just kind of like it's kind of like one of these things. It's time to grow up because you know we were, you know, we were both baby faces, and
Mhm.
at the time, and so he says, "I want you guys to go out and go Broadway, 1 hour draw."
Oof.
Now, you know, and we're looking at each other like, holy crap, you know, and uh, almost like, you know, who's going to lead this thing, and you know, and it ended up being it was spontaneous. We both called it. We would, you know, we would come up with stuff, and he would suggest, you know, anyway. It was so good, you know. Bill had us work the whole territory. I mean, it's kind of like every night I was working an hour Broadway with Paul Orndorff. We got to know each other real well, you know. But that's a guy I miss. I mean, because he was good. He was funny too. He was funny because it was really easy to rib him.
Oh, he was like gullible.
Yeah, he was really, yeah. You know, and it's like, you know, then you do something or say something and something, and then he'd look at you like, really? No, Paul, not really. uh,
Man,
God,
what a
but, who did I not get to work with?
I mean, another guy that jumped out was maybe somebody like Cowboy Bob Orton. Did you ever get to work with? Oh wait, you worked with him, didn't you?
You know what? Bob and I never worked.
Oh, I'm thinking of Jake.
Yeah,
Jake.
by that time we were both heels, and yeah, he would be. Yeah, he would definitely be somebody on the list, But good gosh almighty.
That's a good question. We'll have to give it some more thought. We've got Loftus 521 up next, who asks, was there any wrestler you were afraid to wrestle? So was there anybody who like maybe had the tendency to hurt people, or who maybe just didn't like you, who you thought might take liberties with you?
I can't think. I can't think of. No, I can't think of anybody that. I never. I pretty much got along with everybody, and it's kind of like there's this just in life. There's a lot of times there's guys that something that you don't like about them. But that's life. But I can't think of anybody that I never had a major issue. I mean, it's like with anybody, nothing, no match I ever had turned into a shoot,
It's impressive.
And wow.
In all your years in wrestling, I mean, that's I would say borderline unheard of for you to not have some kind of an issue with somebody somewhere along the way, especially where it's a sport where it's very physical and guys are throwing punches, and every once in a while a dude catches you with a nasty one, you give a receipt, and maybe then he gets butt hurt. So it's interesting that you never ended up, getting super crossways with anybody.
It just never happened. It did. And I don't know if that's, because my trip to the top was pretty quick. I mean, if you look at it, if you look where I started in 75, and like by what 77, 78, I'm a main event guy.
Yeah.
Of course, not in New York. Working in the Amarillo territory. I mean, I did. Of course, when I went to New York the first time, I wasn't a main event guy. And I wasn't there very long. But when I came back, when Vince brought me back with the whole $1 Million Man gimmick, oh my gosh. It's like people hated me when I walked out the door.
Yep.
First time they saw me, because they'd seen all those vignettes.
And that might be part of it too, where it's like, not only is your father in the business, so I think people had a lot of respect for you, but also, like you were climbing up the ladder, and a guy who's near the top of the card is probably not a dude you want to take liberties with or piss with backstage, because not that you would, but could impact your career, especially for a guy who's lower on the card.
Yeah.
Ken Franks is up next, kind of related. What was the worst backstage fight that you ever witnessed?
Oh man,
I could throw one out there that I know you were around for. Maybe you saw it. Were you present for the Dynamite Kid dust up with Jacques Rougeau?
Yeah.
Okay, would that qualify as the worst you saw?
Probably.
What's your reaction? Are you trying to break it up? Were you friendly with Dynamite? How did that go?
Well, both of those guys, I mean, I got along with, but and I can't even remember now what it was about.
So apparently they had been having a lot of matches together, and Dynamite and Bulldog were doing a lot of stiff ribs backstage. And these guys were the victims of some really stiff ribs from these guys, and they're getting fed up with it. Dynamite kind of challenged them on a few occasions, like, hey, if you want to make something of it, we can. And nothing was coming of it. And then finally, it was like one rib too far. Jacques showed up to the building with a roll of quarters in his hand and punched out Dynamite's teeth right there backstage. So yeah, it's, I mean, from what I've heard, it was a very alarming scene.
I can't think of anybody that didn't get along with Dynamite Kid.
Really?
I mean, he was a pretty good guy. I certainly had no issues with him, and he was a ribber. But you take ribs in stride. You try to, in the business. And of course, obviously too, you could take a rib too far too. Damage somebody's property or something like that. But I don't know, Jacques and his brother Raymond were, both, from Canada and good guys, but I don't, I didn't have, so I got along with all of those guys. That's just, I just, life's too short to get into, because I'll just say that it never happened to me. Nobody that I ever worked with, said, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do a job for him, and there was nobody that I ever worked with that where I was supposed to get beat that I didn't, it's like, what, are you kidding? Because I usually, what the big picture is. That's the thing you got to remember.
Mm-hmm.
And where are you? Where do you fit into that big picture? And as long as, it was, if I was going to say anything to anybody, I would go to like Pat Patterson. Like, hey, Pat, like, are you sure you want to do that right now? Or, could we do something else? But that was very rare. And, I can't think of anybody that I ever had serious heat with, unless it's somebody I don't know who, who thinks I got, more than they got, or I don't know. It's just
interesting. And it's like you're kind of like the model citizen when it comes to wrestling, really, because you're just, it's a job and you view it like a job. Where I think a lot of guys, they kind of get in their own head about like, oh well, this guy's getting pushed more than me, he doesn't deserve it, he shouldn't beat me here. Where you've got the right attitude.
Let's go back to the gimmick. I mean, it's kind of like I thought, when I show up, and all the guys in the dressing room, I come in and from the get-go, I'm flying first class and have limousine service every day and all of that. But, there wasn't anybody that spoke that outright. Or in other words, like they were jealous of it or whatever. It was like almost everybody to a man said, hey, good for you. If I'd have gotten that break, you think I wouldn't? I mean, everybody thought, okay, if that came my way, would I take it? Of course you would.
Be foolish not to. Yeah.
You'd be foolish not to. And again, and I would never begrudge somebody else getting a break. It's kind of like, now it's a different thing when it's kind of like if you saw somebody that wasn't, I don't know,
somebody who didn't respect the business getting a big break.
Okay, there you go. Yeah, if there's one guy, and there is that one guy that I had an issue with was the Ultimate Warrior, because quite frankly, I think he got a break he didn't deserve.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't respect wrestling. He didn't grow up in wrestling, and he had one thing going for him: a good body. If you go back and listen to any of the interviews he did, when he got through, I would look at somebody and go, what the hell did he just say? There's other guys that I've worked with that, got a break but they're good people. They're good people. And they were appreciative of, it's kind of like, I'm going to help get you over. We're going to go out, we're going to have a match tonight. And I'm going to help make you a star.
Right.
Now, I've never said that to any guy, but I mean, basically, when I have matched with different guys, I know what was wanted, what was needed, and that was it. It's kind of like that's what this is. You know, it's kind of like, and it's kind of like, you know, I was on the top for a long time. I mean, I remember Bruce told me, he says, Ted, he says, you know, you were there in terms of like the top heel for a long time.
Yes.
You know, most heels never were, you know, the top guy that long. And so after you're the top guy, well, then you step down and, you know, you're not the type guy, but now you're helping make other guys. But at the same time, it's just a matter of, you're the promoter, you know who to protect and who to take care of and how to take care of them. And like, but as a heel, you got to know how to put somebody over and not lose your heat.
And you nailed it, man. You know, I was asked years ago. I was talking to somebody doing an interview or something like that, and somebody said, "Well, who's the greatest heel in the history of wrestling?" This is before I even knew you, and I was like, "It's Ted DiBiase," because he never changed. He was always a heel. You know, I can't really think of many other people who came to Vince's territory and worked as a heel the entire time that they were there. You know, especially if they're there for more than 5 years.
Yeah.
So I mean, yeah, no, it's incredible, and on top the entire time, amazing. And that's actually kind of a good transition to our next question. Adam Pell asks, "How do you feel about your rating and representation in video games?" So the greatest heel of all time, Ted. Here's a look. I know you said you didn't see much of yourself in video games, so that's why I wanted to include this slide. That's you in from 2019, the WWE video game. It's an 85 overall rating out of 100.
Oh, okay. I thought it was like there's 84 guys in front of me.
No. So it's 85 out of 100.
You know, I mean, 85%. That's
a B, dude.
Yeah.
No, it's funny. I wanted to throw that in there.
I wonder who they do those. I wonder how they find out, how they get to that rating. Who do they go out and ask, or do they just decide themselves? Oh, I think you're 85. You know,
it's just the video game guys. They just come up with some arbitrary number. But what's funny is, you know, nowadays that's kind of a thing in pro wrestling with some of the younger guys, because a lot of these guys are my age or younger. So they're like, you know, they grew up with video games, so they're into it. And then, you know, oh my gosh, I'm going to be on a video game. They get all excited, and then they see their rating. And a lot of the guys get really disappointed, and they'll take to Twitter and say, I shouldn't be an 80 overall or whatever. So it's just, I thought it would be fun to show you that and get your take on it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, hey, 85 is pretty high. I mean, if you take into consideration all the other guys that, you know, are in that to be voted on. I mean, it's like, okay, I'll take it, you know.
So Peter Allen is up next. Did you ever spend any time around Vince Russo? And if so, what did you think of him?
You know, I knew him very casually. I mean, never spent a lot of time around him. Didn't really know him that well. I don't know if I was, you know, at the time that he got put in the position he was put in, whether he was ready for it. I mean, because to be put in a position where you're going to be calling shots and stuff, you got to know a lot about the business.
Mm-hmm.
And my question would be, Vince Russo, where the hell did you learn about the business? You know,
it's a good question.
What makes you an authority on anything in wrestling? Because you never climbed in a damn ring and did anything.
Do you feel that the best bookers traditionally are, or at least guys writing creative traditionally, are the guys who were former wrestlers themselves?
Absolutely, without a doubt. Because you know, being a wrestler, you're the one out there, and you're the one. And it's kind of like when I talk to guys, I said, you know, you can't go out in the ring and just assume. And like you could do something in a match and it really get over great. Now you could go to the next town and you could do something similar or the same thing, and maybe not get the reaction that you got the night before. And I'm serious. Every crowd is different. Now, the greater percentage of the people that you do things in front of are going to have the same reaction, but you can't count on that. I mean, it's kind of like, that's why you can't just go out and before the match, I'll say, okay, here's what we're going to do step by step by step by step. You know, the dying art of wrestling is improv. Because way back when, the only thing I knew going into the ring was the finish. Now, if I had history with a guy, now if like say Jake and I had already had a match and whatever, and the last thing that the people saw in the ring, was me, really putting the screws to him, okay, and in a bad way. Well, then the next time I get in the ring with them, I'm not just gonna stroll out there and just get in the ring and get introduced and start the match. It's like the next time it's kind of like I get in the ring and he hits the ring on a dang dead run and chases me right out of the ring and around the ring and because of what the people saw last time.
Yes.
So I might know the beginning. Okay, here's how we're going to start, and here's how it's going to finish. But everything else is on the fly. And there aren't, I'm telling you, there's not a handful of guys today that can do that. It's a dying art.
Today, the greatest emphasis is, okay, let's put these guys together because they'll have a great match. And it's that you're right. What's missing really is that ability to tell a story and say like, well, here's what happened last week. So we should structure the match this way, where they're just going out there and doing all these spectacular things. And it's amazing. Like they're incredible athletes, but like they're not.
That's it. It's like, I like it. It's kind of like that. That's why it's so hard for me to watch today's product. Is because I watch them and it's like, okay, I might as well be watching a tumbling match.
Yep.
Because all I see is them doing high spots. It's kind of like, I've seen guys, do a deal where you get, I used to take a bump where, I would have, we call it an ass bump, where the guy picks you up, it looks like he's, dropping your rear end right on his leg. And then I would take that and then I would bounce off of that. And I knew how to hit the rope in just the right part of my body to where my legs would fly up and I would go over the top rope to the floor.
Yep.
Now, today, you do that, they bounce up like nothing happened.
Right.
In turn, I would lay there and sell it. Yeah, all you young wrestlers out there, learn how to sell. In other words, there's got to be a reason for a babyface to make a comeback. And unless he sells, your comeback's only going to be as good as your sell job.
If you're not selling, you're not in danger. If you're not in danger, then the audience is going to disengage from it.
Exactly. And that's what's missing today. It's just like, okay, I'm going to go out here and I'm going to impress all these people with, oh, look at all these great bumps I'm taking. They're not impressed with that. It's like, tell me a story. The story's not supposed to be what's going on out in the parking lot or what happened back in the locker room and whatever. Those things can be interjected into the story. But the story that the people want to see is the damn match.
Right.
Tell me a story in the ring. Have a compelling contest in that ring that looks real. Enough said. Yeah.
Let's get to a couple more and then I'll let you go, Ted. Dennis Tyson asks, any good Roddy Piper stories? Did you spend much time around Piper?
I loved Roddy Piper. He was great. Piper was great. He's another guy that I did have an opportunity to work with some, and I loved every minute of it because he got it. He knew what it was about. It's kind of like you can have a lot of guys. You got to have a lot of talented athletes. Again, take the Warrior, for example, who dedicated to building his body, and that's impressive. Oh my gosh, what a great body. but when you put him in the ring, you know, he's got to be able to do something with that great body. And unfortunately, you know, he wasn't in the business long enough to know how to do that.
Mm-hmm.
He had to be led step by step by step, and even sometimes then, you know, he would do just what he wanted to do, and that's why you know, his run didn't last long, did it?
It did not.
You know, and that's why. Is because you know what else can you do? When you saw one match of the Ultimate Warriors, you saw every match because that he did the same shit every night.
And then you've got a guy like Piper who maybe wasn't known as a body guy, but
no, and you know what? Oh my gosh, Roddy and I, we tore the house down a lot, and I did have I had a good little run with them, and I loved it. You know, you never knew, you know, you never knew what to expect sometimes, but that was a good thing.
He was one of a kind, that's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Next question is about a guy that they did a Dark Side of the Ring about him too, and I think he's one of a kind. It's Dr. D. David Schultz. Isaac King asks, what did you think about it when Dr. D slapped that reporter?
You know, I never knew that guy.
Dr. D, really?
I never really knew him. By the time I got there, he was gone. And but I would say this. I mean, that would be an old school response, and I loved it. It's kind of like, you know, you're calling my, you know, you're sitting here, you know, you want to interview me, and you're just in my face, you know, telling me that my business is phony. And that's when he slapped the guy. Did that feel like it was fake?
The look on Dr. D's face as this conversation is going on too, it's like I almost want to tell John Stossel, like, just shut up, like, don't stop talking. This dude's about to get violent with you. You can just see it written on his face, and then he just keeps pushing. And I mean, hard to blame Dr. D. I know it cost him an awful lot of money, and you know, certainly cost him probably what would have been greater fame. But man, he was protecting the business.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, you know, I mean, that goes back to the guy who's doing the interview. You know, it's almost like, you know, approaching a wrestler, and you know, it's almost like, okay, wrestling is show business, and pretty much the whole world knows that. Of course, they know it now for sure. And of course, there was a time when it's kind of like if you went to a magic show today, you know that guy out there doesn't really have the ability to make an elephant disappear,
right?
Or a car or whatever, but he did. And then you go, the intrigue is, how the hell did he do that? I mean, now you're, you know, it's keeping people in that place of suspended disbelief, where
absolutely,
where you like today, if you walk into a movie theater, you know you're going to a movie, but when you sit down, if the actors that are on that screen are really good at what they do, they draw you into the story they're telling, and they can make you cry, they can make you angry, they can make you laugh. I mean, that's the deal. Well, and it's the same thing with wrestling. So, John Stossel, don't come in and try and basically make us look like a bunch of dumbasses.
Yep.
Oh, it's just, you know, you guys aren't really getting hurt, really. How many power slams have you taken? You know, how many backdrops have you taken? How many times have you been slammed on the mat? I'm not landing on a trampoline out there. I'm landing on a, you know, I mean, yeah, it's a ring. It gets a little give. You know, we'll come out here on the floor. I'll show you a body slam on the floor too. I've been there. I've done that.
Sure. That
one hurts a little bit more, you know, and I'm almost 70 years old, and I've had both my knees replaced. And that was cumulative. That was, you know, high school and college football. But, you know, like night after night after night, how many times have I, you know, fallen to my knees, or one knee, or, you know, who knows? But, you know, I had 2 discs taken out of my neck. There's a lot of wrestlers that have had that same surgery because when you fall on your back, most of that is absorbed across the top of your shoulders.
Mm-hmm.
And, of course, you keep your head tucked so you don't knock yourself out.
Yeah.
And it just becomes, habit, but boom, 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 boom. And basically what my doctor told me, he says, Ted, he says it was cumulative. This doesn't happen because just one night, you hit wrong. You hit night after night after night after night, how many times? 10, 20 times a night, 300 so many nights a year. And eventually you messed up a disc. So I had back then they would take a bone chip out of your hip.
Mm-hmm.
And that they do it artificially now, but back then they take a bone chip out of your hip and replace the disc with that bone chip and kind of fuse it to where you don't have as much movement, and then but now they use something artificial, and I'll be honest with you, the place where they took the bone chip out of my hip, that hurt more than my neck did. It's just like, dang.
I mean, nothing fake about the injuries that you guys suffered. So,
it was, it's kind of like, was the blood real? Well, the blood was real. It was self-inflicted most of the time,
mm-hmm.
But there were times it's like that. One time I just saw that, it was the deal that maybe it was where I turned, or Murdoch got involved in it and everything, but I had hit it really, really hard and bled really. I mean, they had my head all wrapped up, and then the bandage came off, and it was just every time my heart would beat, it would.
Right before you turned on JYD, you had a big bandage on your head whenever we watched it back, and it looked like your fist was wrapped up too. So maybe that was what you had seen recently with me.
Yeah.
All right, let's do one more and then we'll call it a day on Ask Ted Anything for this week. Jimmy Chris asks, Jim Ross has said that Bob Sweetan was a complete asshole to him. Did you get along with Bob?
You know what? Bob Sweetan could be a complete asshole. And I watched him work a lot. And because his style of work was very similar to my dad's. So I mean, he was a really good heel. He was really good at being a wrestler, but as far as a human being, he left a lot to desire.
Yeah, I've heard about some outside the ring incidents too, which we won't get into, but not necessarily a great guy. But even Jim, Jim had nothing positive to say about him, but he did say I will say the man was very good at his job.
Yeah, and I totally agree with Jim. That's as far as that goes.